So regarding the session store, we're not going to worry about that right now. We're going to worry about that once we actually have TypeORM set up. So now that we have the session set up, what's next that we can set up? Well, actually, we can actually set up TypeORM right now, which is going to allow us to set up connections to the database, and we can interact with the database using repositories. So let's go ahead and do that. So in order to set up TypeORM and configure it, we need to first make sure we install the necessary dependencies. So we'll go ahead and first install, let's see, nest.js /TypeORM. So this is the nest.js wrapper for TypeORM. We're going to install the actual TypeORM package as well. We're going to install MySQL 2, and then we're going to install reflect metadata. I think that should be all. Also, it's officially January 1st, so Happy New Year to those who are watching this video. Not that this is live, but I just figured I would mention that. Okay, so now that we have all those dependencies installed, what's next is we need to go ahead and configure TypeORM. This is going to be pretty simple. So all we got to do is just go into, let's see, the app.module.ts. So this is the main module, okay? And we're going to import the TypeORM module, and we're going to call for root. And also, if you hear any fireworks in the background, yeah, it's because it's the new year, so there's a lot of people who are going to be blasting fireworks here. Not in my place, but, you know, outside. So just wanted to let you all know in case if you hear any fireworks or noise in the background. Anyways, so we're going to go ahead and set up TypeORM. So for type, we're going to put MySQL, because that's the database engine that we're using. If you want to use something like PostgreSQL, you can do that, and it'll work very, very similar to MySQL or MySQL. I don't know why I say PostgreSQL and then I say MySQL. It doesn't make any sense, but whatever. Anyways, so let's set up the host now. So process.env MySQL DB host. Okay, remember we're referencing all of our environment variables. So let's go ahead and set up the username. Same thing with password as well. And then last but not least, the database name. And we're only missing a couple things. We're missing the port, which I'm just going to hard code that right here. 23306. So that's the default port that that is set when you install MySQL. And if you do not have MySQL installed, I have a video on my channel that will show you how to install MySQL, but it's fairly simple. Okay, we're going to set synchronize to true. Do not set this to true when you're ready to deploy your application to production. Okay, make sure to set to false, because if you set this to true during production, you're going to end up you might lose data. Synchronize, what that does is whenever you modify an entity, a TypeORM entity, it'll automatically update it with it'll automatically reflect those changes to the actual database tables. So let's say, for example, if in an entity you remove a field, in the MySQL database, it's going to remove the column that is associated with that field. Okay, we're going to go ahead and add this entities property, which is just going to be an empty array. So all entities that we create are going to be registered by passing it inside this entities array. Okay, so now that we have TypeORM set up, we can go ahead and actually look at the logs real quick. And there's a lot because there we go. So it's giving us an issue. It's saying, let's see, what's the problem here? It's saying access denied for us. Let's see, what's the problem here? It's saying that we are not using a password. That's interesting. Oh, whoops, I forgot. It's process.env MySQL. There we go. Let's fix that real quick. That should fix that. You shouldn't get any issues now. Perfect. So it connected to the database perfectly. Yeah, so we mess up the variable name, but that's okay. All right, cool. So now that we have successfully connected to the database, What's next is we need to actually create a couple of entities. Okay, now let me actually open up, or let me actually log in to the MySQL server. Okay, and let me just note this. So currently, this database was created when we set up the Discord bot in a lot of episodes ago. Now we're not going to be creating any new tables. Actually, the only table that we will create probably it will be session table and as well as the user. But we need to make sure that the entity for this guild configurations is the same exact one in the dashboard. Okay, if they're not the same, you are going to have issues with fields, and you're gonna have issues with the fields. Okay, so we need to make sure that they are exactly the same. So what we're gonna do is this. So I'm gonna go inside the source folder. I'm gonna create a folder called TypeORM. I'm going to create a folder called entity. So it literally is exactly the same, the exact same thing that I did in the Discord bot episodes. And we're going to create a guild configuration.ts entity. Okay. And this is going to have to be exactly the same as the dashboard. So we're going to go ahead, and what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to go ahead and copy that. All right, so if we go back to the Discord bot code, I'll go over here. And if I go into guild configuration, like I said, I'm just going to copy this, just paste that over there. And this should be fine. We're not going to modify anything at all. And if we make a change here, we will also make a change with the Discord, with the entity of the Discord bot. I know it kind of sounds a little bit hacky, but you know, we'll just do that for now. It's not, there shouldn't be any issues though. Okay. All right, cool. So great. Okay. So now that we've done that, what we need to do next is we need to create another entity for the session. Okay. We're going to create one for the session, but before we create one for the session, we're going to create one for the user. Okay. So this user entity is only going to be connected with this API, like the Nest.js application. It's not gonna be anything to do with the Discord bot at all. Okay, so we'll go ahead and create that. Cool. And what's next is, let's see. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and have the primary generated column, this is just going to be the actual primary key, which is automatically generated. So this is just going to be the ID that MySQL generates. We're then going to need a column for the Discord ID, which is going to be a string. And I'm going to go ahead and pass in some properties. So unique is going to be set to true because we cannot have two users with the same Discord ID. So we're going to set that unique constraint. And I'm just going to set the name for the table to look like this, Discord _ID. So we have the Discord ID. What else do we need? Let's see. So this is going to be the Discord user. So when the Discord user, when the user clicks authorize, we get a bunch of different information, right? We get the email, we get the guilds that they're in, we get their avatar, their username, etc., etc. We don't necessarily need to keep that information, like the username and the avatar, because those things are going to change all the time. Same thing with the discriminator. You could save it, but you would just need to make sure that every single time they authorize, they update. You update the database. I don't really see a point on saving it, so we're not going to save it. Okay. You could save it, like I said, but I think it's pointless. We're going to go ahead and save the Discord ID. We need to make sure we have that. Permissions, I don't think we need to save permissions because we're going to fetch the Discord API to get the permissions, and the guilds, so we don't need to worry about the guild permissions, okay? I think the Discord ID is the only thing that we really need. I think that's the only important thing that we need, and I'm trying to remember if there's anything else that was also important. I think there's also the, there was also the OAuth 2 credentials, but we'll save that later, okay? I think for now, we'll save just the Discord ID. We can save the email if we want to, but like I said, I really don't think the email is just really all that important, in my opinion. You can save it, and you can, send emails to the user if something happens, but we'll worry about that later. For now, I'll just save these two, and if we need anything else, we'll add it. Okay, last but not least, we can go ahead and create, well, let me just save this real quick. Okay, there we go. Let's go into our database. Let's do show tables. Oh yeah, one thing that I forgot to do is we need to go into the app module, and we need to go ahead and add our entities inside this array. So what we're going to do is we could do this. We can just import that like this and import that right over there. And if I save, it should automatically create the tables for us. Well, it's going to create the user for us, not the guild configuration. The guild configuration should not be touched at all. You can see that all the data is still there from the Discord bot videos, okay? But the user, yeah, that's fine. I'm going to go ahead and just change the name to users, so it's plural. Instead of just adding the entities like this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create, let's see, I'm going to create an index.ts file right here. And I'm just going to go ahead and import, I'm going to import the entities, put them in an array, and then export that array. So export const entities equals user. Okay, so that way what I can do is I can just simply import entities just like that, and I can, so instead of importing every single thing, I can just put that all into the array, and it'll work for us that way. Okay, so it'll save us a couple of lines of imports from our code to keep it a lot cleaner. Cool, so that's pretty much it for those two entities. So the next thing that we'll do is, since we already have our entities created and we have our TypeORM stuff set up, we can then set up the session store. Okay, we're going to be using Connect TypeORM, which is a library. If you've used session stores before using Express with, let's say, for example, MongoDB, you may have used something like Connect Mongo, you may have used Connect SQLize, or Connect MySQL, right? There's a lot of different session stores. The reason why we're using Connect TypeORM is because because we're using TypeORM, so it makes sense to use Connect TypeORM. There is also another library that you can use for TypeORM for the session store, but we'll just use Connect TypeORM. Okay, and the documentation is right over here. And to explain a little bit more about what a session store is, literally all it is just saves the session data to the database. So what happens is, instead of saving the session store in memory, what's going to happen is that it's going to save it into the database. So it's going to create a new table for us, and it's going to save that stuff into the database. Okay, when the server restarts for whatever reason, the session data will still be in the database, and then it's going to be picked up by the library, and it's going to serialize that into that. So let's say, for example, if the user logs in and you are saving the sessions into memory, if the server goes down and it goes back up, the user is actually going to be logged out because all the session data is gone. If you're building an application that involves something like a cart, well, let's say, for example, the user may want to come back to the website and look at their cart, but what happens if it's empty? If it's empty, the user might be a little bit annoyed because they may have had, let's say, a lot of different items in the cart. So this is a way to make sure that the application is a lot more persistent and it gives the user a better experience, which is why we use session stores. Okay, like I said, all it does is just literally saves the session data into the database. That's all it does. Okay, so it's nothing too complicated. Let's go ahead and install Connect TypeORM. We already have majority of the dependencies installed already, so lucky for us, the only thing that we need to install is just literally one dependency, which is just Connect TypeORM. Okay, and once we have done that, we can simply just go to the entities file and just create an entity called session.ts. I'm going to call this I'm going to just call this session.ts. Yeah, that's fine. And what I'm going to do, and this is just literally exactly from the documentation, we're going to create a class that's going to implement the iSession interface. Okay. Yeah, there we go. And we're going to use the entity decorator. Okay. Now that we've done that, what we can do is we can go ahead and set the column. So expired at, so this is when the session is going to expire, or when it expires, right? We're going to set this to date.now. You can also just set the data type to date if you want to. I don't really think you need to worry about setting a default field. Because this is just the default field, but we already have max age set over here. So that will just be populated for us, okay? We'll set a primary column. This column is going to be a varchar, and length is going to be 255. And this is just going to be the ID of the session, okay? And then last, we'll do column. The type is going to be text, and this is just going to be the data. I should actually call this data, but we'll call it JSON. And we also need to use the index decorator for this column over here. Not sure why this is giving me, let's see. Oh, I guess we don't need this, yeah, and this. Okay, so let me explain what we just did. And again, like I said, this is exactly from the documentation, okay? So the expired at, this is literally when the session is going to expire. Okay. Let me actually, you know what? Let me do this. Yeah, I'll leave that alone for now. The ID, this is going to be the ID of the session. Okay. So that's how it tells which session belongs to who. So every session is going to have a unique ID that's generated with the Express Session Library. This JSON property, this is literally just going to be a JSON string. It's going to be a JSON object serialized into a string, and it's going to contain all of the session data. So it's going to contain whatever we serialize into the session store. And you'll see how that's going to work when we actually have Passport set up. Okay, but don't worry about this too much for now. Let's go into the main.ts file and let's set up our store. So what we'll do is right over here, we're going to go ahead and do this. So we're going to need to create a new TypeORM store like that. And this is imported from Connect TypeORM. I'm not sure why it does that. It should be from TypeORM store. Okay. What we're going to do from here is we're going to go ahead. We can actually leave the options empty. So we're not going to provide any options. We're going to connect this. And we're going to provide the session repository, which we're going to need to get up here. So if I go over here, let me go ahead and create a variable called session repository. We're going to go ahead and use the get connection method that comes from TypeORM. Okay. Or wait, not get connection, sorry, get repository. And then we're going to pass in that session class that we created, and make sure it's coming from that, make sure it's the actual session class that we created, because there's session classes or session interfaces that come from other packages. So it's this one right over here. Okay, let me just remove this get connection right over here. And we're going to go ahead and pass in session repository right over there. Let's see. Oh, the reason why we're getting this error is because we did not add this session entity over here, so we can just import that right over here, just like that. And there we go. So that error should go away. What's going on here? It's saying session expired is not supported by MySQL. Okay, that's fine. I'm not sure why that error would happen. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll just get rid of that and we'll just set this to date. Well, actually, no, we can just set this to number, actually, because date.now is actually a number. Okay, that's fine. Yep, that's fine. Okay, great. And then the table should be created in the database. As you can see right over here, it's created, the session is created in the database, or the session table. Okay, so the session store works. So when we log in, our session data will be saved into the database, but we can't test that out right now because we haven't set up Passport yet. But like I said, don't worry too much about that. It should be just fine. One more thing that I think I may have forgot to do was I think I may have forgot to set this column to be a big int instead of just a regular number. So we'll do that. What's going on here? Why would that happen? Interesting. You know what I'm gonna do is let me actually do this. Let me see. I'm gonna go ahead and drop the session table. And let me go ahead and try this again. Yeah, that was just a silly mistake that I made. I forgot to set that up. Okay, there we go. I think there was like some conflict, so we couldn't, it couldn't synchronize properly. Okay, that's fine. All right, cool. I guess it wasn't able to change it from the regular, the original data type into big int. Okay, now that we have the session store set up, we are pretty much done with the session stuff. And what's next that we need to do is we can actually start working on the authentication module, because we pretty much finished all of the session stuff. I don't really think there's anything else, so we can actually start moving on to the authentication stuff now, such as passport and OAuth2 with Discord. So let's go and move on to that.